Right now, you're probably alone. Or if you're not, you could be in about 10 seconds. You could walk into another room and shut the door. You could put on headphones. You could lock yourself in a bathroom, and no one on earth would have the right to follow you. Privacy feels like a basic human condition, something so obvious it barely needs explaining. Now imagine living your entire life without a single door. No walls you could call your own. No moment, from birth to death, when you weren't within arm's reach of another person. No private thoughts you could write down where no one would read them, because writing didn't exist. No corner of the world that was yours and yours alone. Welcome to the life of nearly every human who lived before, about 10,000 years ago. So here's the question. Did ancient humans even have a private life? Did the concept of privacy exist at all? Could you keep a secret, have a thought no one knew, do anything unobserved, when you lived your whole life in a small group, in a single shared space with no walls and no locks? That's what we're talking about today. And the answer is so much stranger and so much more revealing about who we are than you'd expect. Because it turns out privacy isn't a basic human condition at all. It's a recent invention. And understanding how our ancestors lived without it tells us something deep about what privacy actually is, and what we gave up to get it. Buckle up. Let's rewind. First, let's be honest about something. When most people imagine prehistoric life, they picture a lone caveman in his own cave, grunting by a fire. A private little hideaway. That's not the reality. Not even close. For the overwhelming majority of human history, humans were not solitary. They lived in small, tight-knit bands, usually somewhere between 20 and 50 people. These weren't strangers. They were your extended family. The people you were born among and would likely die among. You knew every single one of them, more completely than most modern people know anyone at all. You knew their voices in the dark, the sound of their footsteps, their moods, their habits, their smell. And critically, you were almost never alone. Anthropologists who have studied modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose lifestyles offer a window into how humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years, have documented this again and again. Solitude in these societies is rare and often viewed with suspicion. A person who wanders off alone is doing something unusual, possibly dangerous, possibly worrying. The default state of human existence was together. Think about what that means. You slept in a shared space, often a single shelter or a cluster of them, bodies close together for warmth and safety. You ate together. You worked together. You raised children together, not as isolated parents, but as a collective, where every adult had a hand in every child. When you were sick, others watched over you. When you were grieving, others grieved beside you. When you argued, the whole group heard it. There was no bedroom door to slam. No, I just need some space. No going home at the end of the day to be alone, because there was no separate home, and no concept of alone time as something a healthy person needed. The very idea would have seemed strange. So, if privacy as we know it didn't exist, how did people manage the things we now consider deeply private? How did they handle secrets, intimacy, bodily functions, personal grief? The answer starts with something surprising. They had privacy, just not the kind you're thinking of. Here's the key insight that changes everything. Privacy isn't one thing. It's several different things that we've bundled together. and ancient humans had some of them in abundance, even while completely lacking others. Modern privacy is mostly spatial. We get privacy by physically separating ourselves. Walls, doors, rooms, fences. We retreat behind barriers. But there's another kind of privacy that doesn't require walls at all. Anthropologists sometimes call it social or psychological privacy, and it's achieved not by hiding your body, but by an unspoken agreement about where attention is allowed to go. In societies where people live in constant close contact, humans develop something remarkable, the ability to grant each other privacy in plain sight. It's a set of subtle social rules, what researchers call civil inattention. You deliberately don't look. You don't listen, even when you can hear. You pretend not to notice. You give someone room not by walking away, but by mentally looking the other way. You actually do this constantly in modern life and barely realize it. When you're in a crowded elevator, you don't stare at the person 6 inches from your face. On a packed train, you don't read over someone's shoulder, even though you easily could. In a shared apartment, you don't comment on every phone call you overhear. This is civil inattention, the granting of privacy without physical separation. And it's almost certainly ancient. It may be one of the oldest social technologies humans ever developed, precisely because early humans had no walls and desperately needed some other way to coexist. So an ancient human did have a kind of private life, a zone of personal experience that others politely declined to intrude on. A man sitting apart at the edge of camp, staring into the distance, was understood to be wanting to be left with his thoughts, and people left him. A grieving woman was given emotional room even while physically surrounded. The privacy was real. It just lived in social custom rather than in architecture. This is a profound shift in how to think about the question. Ancient humans weren't privacy-deprived primitives longing for a door. They had a sophisticated, invisible system of privacy that we've largely forgotten how to use because we replaced it with walls. Now let's talk about the body, because this is where modern people get most curious and most uncomfortable. How did ancient humans handle the basic bodily realities of life? Washing, relieving themselves, changing, the simple physical functions that we now treat as intensely private, when there were no bathrooms, no private rooms, no closed doors. The honest answer is that many of these things were simply less private than they are now. And that wasn't experienced as shameful, because shame around the body is itself partly a cultural construction that varies enormously across time and place. Consider that even today, attitudes toward bodily privacy differ dramatically around the world. In some cultures, communal bathing is completely normal and carries no embarrassment whatsoever. In others, it would be unthinkable. The Romans built enormous public baths that were centers of social life. Communal sweat lodges, shared bathing pools, and open-air washing have been part of countless human societies. The intense privacy many modern people attach to the unclothed body is not a human universal. It's a particular cultural attitude that developed in particular places and times. For bodily functions, hunter-gatherers generally went a short distance from camp, far enough for basic hygiene and odor, which matters when you live in a fixed spot, and far enough for a degree of modesty, but not the sealed-off, locked-door privacy of a modern bathroom. The privacy was a matter of a little distance, and, again, civil inattention. Everyone understood not to follow, not to watch, not to comment. The deeper point is this. Many things we experience as requiring privacy require it because we've been taught they do. The body's functions were a normal, visible part of life in a small band. there was no audience to perform modesty for, because the audience was your family, who had seen it all your entire life and thought nothing of it. In a strange way, the constant exposure produced its own kind of ease. When nothing can be hidden, very little feels shameful. Here's a dimension almost nobody considers. Secrets. Could an ancient human keep a secret at all? This is genuinely one of the most interesting questions in the whole topic, because secrecy and privacy are deeply linked, and a small face-to-face community is just about the hardest environment in the world to keep a secret in. Think about it. In a band of 30 people who have known each other their whole lives, who see each other constantly, who notice every change in behavior, concealment is extraordinarily difficult. If you started acting differently, people noticed. If two people formed a quiet bond, others sensed it. If someone took more than their share of food, it was seen. The transparency of small group life was nearly total, and this had enormous consequences for how human societies functioned. In a world without privacy, reputation was everything. Your entire social existence was visible to the group, all the time, for your whole life. There was no fresh start, no anonymous city to disappear into, no way to be one person here and a different person there. You were known. Completely, permanently known. This visibility was actually a powerful force for cooperation. Anthropologists argue that this constant mutual observation was one of the things that made human societies work. Cheating, freeloading, lying, betrayal. All of these are much harder when everyone can see everything and remembers everything. The lack of privacy created accountability. It enforced honesty and sharing. The group's collective gaze was a kind of moral pressure that kept everyone in line. So, in a sense, ancient humans didn't keep secrets the way we do. Not because they were incapable of it, but because the entire structure of their world made deep secrecy nearly impossible and socially dangerous. The secrets that did exist tended to be collective rather than individual. Shared knowledge held by the group and hidden from outsiders, like the location of a water source or sacred rituals known only to initiated members. Privacy at the group level was strong. Privacy at the individual level was thin. This is almost the exact opposite of modern life, where we have enormous individual privacy and almost no collective transparency. We can hide our individual lives completely, but we have very little idea what the people around us are actually doing. Ancient humans had the reverse. No individual hiding, but total community knowledge. Two completely different solutions to the problem of living together. Let's talk about the mind, because there's one form of privacy that no amount of crowding can ever take away. The privacy of your own thoughts. This is the one kind of privacy ancient humans had in full, identical to what you have right now, no matter how many people surrounded them, no matter how visible their bodies and behavior. The inside of their own heads was inviolable. Their thoughts, their inner experiences, their private feelings, the things they imagined and remembered and wished for, all of that was completely their own, sealed away from everyone, exactly as yours is. In fact, you could argue that inner mental privacy was more important to ancient humans precisely because they had so little of the external kind. When your every action is visible, your inner life becomes the one truly private space you possess. The thoughts behind your eyes were the only room with a door that locked, and there's something poignant here. We tend to assume that privacy of the mind and privacy of the body go together, but they don't. An ancient human could be sitting in the middle of a crowded camp, in full view of everyone, having a rich, complex, completely private inner life that no one around them could access. The body fully exposed, the mind fully hidden. They could be remembering a person who had died, working through a difficult decision, feeling something they chose never to express, all while appearing to simply sit by the fire. This inner privacy is, in a real sense, the original and most fundamental form of privacy. It predates walls. It predates language. It's the privacy that comes built into being a conscious creature with an inner life. And it was as complete for a human 50,000 years ago as it is for you today. So what changed? When did the kind of privacy we now take for granted actually appear? The answer tracks closely with one of the biggest transformations in human history, the shift to settled agricultural life around 10,000 years ago. When humans stopped roaming and started building permanent homes, something new became possible: architectural privacy. Walls, rooms, separate dwellings, storage spaces that could be closed. The physical ability to put a barrier between yourself and others. As settlements grew into villages, towns, and eventually cities, this accelerated. Houses got internal walls, dividing space by function and by person. The wealthy built homes with private chambers. Over thousands of years, the architecture of separation became more and more elaborate until we arrived at the modern world, where a single family might live in a house with a private room for every member, each able to close a door on all the others. And here's the twist worth sitting with. The city, which gave us walls and physical privacy, also gave us something else: anonymity. For the first time, humans lived among large numbers of people they didn't know. You could walk through a crowd of strangers who had no idea who you were. You could move to a new place and become a new person. The total knowability of small band life dissolved. This was an enormous change, and it cut both ways. We gained the freedom to be unobserved, to reinvent ourselves, to have private lives in the fullest modern sense. But we lost the deep, total belonging of being completely known by a small group of people for your entire life. The same walls that protect us also isolate us. The same anonymity that frees us also makes us strangers to one another. By the time we reach the present day, with locked doors, private rooms, personal devices, and lives, we can keep almost entirely hidden from those around us. We've achieved a level of individual privacy that no ancient human ever experienced. And we've done it by trading away something they had that we mostly don't: a life lived fully in the open, among people who knew us completely. There's a quiet truth to close on. We tend to think of privacy as something humans always wanted and finally got. As if our ancestors were just waiting for walls to be invented so they could finally close a door. But that's not really the story. For the vast majority of human existence, we lived without architectural privacy and didn't miss it, because we built something else in its place. An intricate web of social customs, civil inattention, and mutual trust that let people coexist intimately without either hiding from each other or intruding on each other. They had privacy. It just lived in the agreements between people, rather than in the walls between rooms. What we call privacy today, the locked door, the private room, the hidden life, is genuinely new. It's one of the most dramatic changes in the human condition, and it happened in the last sliver of our history. And like most dramatic changes, it gave us something extraordinary while quietly taking something away. We gained solitude and lost belonging. We gained the freedom to hide and lost the comfort of being fully known. We built walls that protect us, and, in the same motion, separate us. So, did ancient humans have a private life? Yes, just not the kind you have. They had the privacy of the mind, complete and total, the same as yours. They had the privacy of social grace, a politeness of attention we've half forgotten. What they didn't have was the privacy of walls, and they didn't seem to need it because they had something we've been quietly searching for ever since we built the first door and stepped inside, alone. They were never alone. And maybe in some way we can't quite admit, that's the thing we miss most.